Utah Jazz are one of the most interesting teams in the NBA right now. They are hitting a 14-4 record over their past 18 games, and they're doing it in one of the most interesting and intriguing ways possible. I would say most teams have their starting lineups hitting about 30 to 35 minutes a game, but the Utah Jazz mostly have one player, Lauri Markkanen, playing around 30 minutes a game, sometimes two players, and then the rest are sharing about 15 to 25 minutes. The Utah Jazz also have one of the best benches in the NBA over this 14-4 record. They're playing incredibly efficient, and they're doing it in such a unique way. And one of the main reasons they're doing so well is because of Colin Sexton, who has just been thrown into the starting lineup, and since then, as I had mentioned before, is 14-4 since he's been starting. In the month of January alone, he's been averaging 19 points per game, over 50% field goal percentage, 39% from three, and 89% free throw. He's been an unstoppable force. He's been very efficient, and he's even been distributing the ball pretty well as well. But who could forget Lauri Markkanen, who in the month of January as well, 24.5 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, and an astounding 47% from three, with 88% free throw. So they have two guys who are shooting nearly 50, 40, 90 on their team, which is probably one of the huge reasons for this resurgence and this 14-4 record. Now the Jazz, with all their depth that they have, and they're starting to win, you would think that maybe they would want to keep continuing with the playoff push, which might be in the cards. However, there have been reports that are saying the Jazz are still looking to make trades at the NBA trade deadline, maybe to try and give Taylor Hendricks a bit more time, their rookie that they picked with the 9th pick in the draft this past season. But with all of these great players and this synergy going on, they still be making trades or potentially making trades. And that begs the question, who will be traded at the deadline? You know, you hear with Kelly Olynyk and the rumors that he might go to Boston, or that Boston is very intrigued as well. There's a lot of things on the table that the Jazz could give up. We've also heard that Lauri Markkanen is generally untouchable, but the people are still willing to listen. Danny Ainge is still willing to listen to offers for anybody. You know, nobody is unavailable, untouchable, apparently. But we've heard things like you would need 5 first rounds to get Lauri Markkanen and things like that. And so it is a very intriguing thing that we would really have to look into if the Jazz should continue trading or looking to trade, or just continue with this resurgence, and how good will they be? So Doc D, let me ask you something.
All
With
right.
the Jazz playing so well with this 14-4 record over the past 18 games, who are, you know, one of 3 teams, the Boston Celtics and the Clippers, who have been playing incredibly with a record like that, who deserves the most credit, in your opinion, for this Jazz resurgence?
I got 2 answers for you, JD. Will Hardy, that head coach, and then Colin Sexton. I absolutely love the culture that Will Hardy's been building with this team. And, you know, last year, this team that we're seeing now is the exact team that we thought they were going to be last year. Will Hardy has set a foundation that has just been very successful in terms of the culture that he wants to build. And you see guys who are passing the ball. They're not playing selfishly. They're hustling every single play. That's why the Utah Jazz are winning a lot of these games. It's not even the fact that they're more talented, in my opinion, than other teams. They're just hustling. Like, there have been tons of 50-50 balls I've seen the Jazz get, and that has to be contributed to the coaching of Will Hardy. He was last night too. He was mic'd up, and you could kind of hear him talking to Lauri Markkanen. And at that point, the Jazz were down by 10 to the Lakers. And Will Hardy gave great advice. He said, you know what? We just have to weather the storm. This is just a bad stretch. There's a lot of game left. And that is some really sage advice you can get from your coach. And honestly, Will Hardy, if the season were to end now, I think that Will Hardy should absolutely be in the running with Ime Udoka for Coach of the Year for what he's doing with this team. And it's, like the Utah Jazz, too, from a talent perspective, have a ton of great role players. They have some young guns. They have an emerging star in Lauri Markkanen, who is making a great case, in my opinion, for another All-Star appearance. But Colin Sexton, too. Colin Sexton has really become the point guard that this team needs. He's explosive, he's dynamic, he's showing incredible efficiency that he really has never shown throughout his career. He's always been a good volume shooter, but he's showing poise and composure. And I mean, those stats, that's a huge sample size. The month of January, 50, 39, and 89. He's one shot and one free throw away from the 50, 40, 90 club. And, we kind of expect that from Lauri, but Colin is just really settling into his role. I think switching him and Clarkson was a brilliant roster move. Will Hardy he's showing that he is he's ready to coach this organization at a young age of just 35. And, JD, you and I have been a little bit critical of him before in the past, especially at the beginning of the season. But Coach Hardy is really showing that he himself has tenacity, determination, and he's not going to let these guys quit. And I love that, because we could have turned our head around and tucked our tail between our legs when we were 7 to 16. It's oh man, I'm sure a lot of fans were thinking, well, the season is already over, right? But flash forward to now, 14-4, that's an incredible run. And now we finally have broken over 500. This team right now looks like a 40-win team to me. And I'm absolutely loving watching Jazz basketball, not because they're winning, because they're playing with heart, because they're hustling, they're moving the ball, and they're playing what we became accustomed to last year as fans.
Oh, for sure. And what's interesting to me, Doc, as you were talking about Hardy too, is early on in the season, I do think it was a little bit merited just in terms of how the team was playing. A lot of people thought that they might be a potential play-in team, which they're starting to look like that. But even with this resurgence, they look even a little bit better than that. You would think that with this upcoming rest of the half, they might be able to lock in a seed of the playoffs. But the Utah Jazz have really bought into the Hardy system, I believe. I think there was a lot of flack on the zone that he would do or switching the defense, and then it looked like the team just didn't know how to deal with it. And then, he started to switch things around a little bit. They had Clarkson in early on. He wasn't playing super well. He got injured, and then they threw Sexton into the starting lineup, and he started to do very well. So I would say person that deserves the most credit for this great play, and you can't really put one person on it. Obviously, Sexton has been great. Markkanen's been consistently great. Everybody's just been playing very well, but I would say Coach Hardy has done an incredible job, and he's just proving that he's basically a genius. I think that he's done an incredible job. There's no clear-cut superstar on this team. There's just a bunch of pretty good NBA players. They had some woes, but he's built a system to their strengths. And that screams Coach of the Year for me. I don't know about you, Doc, but you were mentioning that as well. Ime Udoka has been very good for the Rockets.
Yeah.
I say Coach Hardy, he's been very, very good. And I think that with all of these trade talks, Doc, there could be some change-ups. And how do you think that might affect the Utah Jazz going into this next half of the season if they end up trading some of their guys?
Well, it really depends on who they're going to trade, JD, because let's say they trade Clarkson and Olynyk. You're losing a huge spark of offense off the bench, and you're losing a great offensive facilitator and a savvy veteran in Olynyk. Those moves are definitely going to hurt the Jazz, but I think with Will Hardy as well and how the roster is constructed, I think that he'll be able to fill those gaps with whatever pieces the team gets back, and also our young guys that really need to get some playing time, and I think they're eventually going to. It seems like John Collins over the past month is finally starting to get his footing as well, which is a good sign, because I just don't see how the Jazz would be able to trade that contract. Honestly, like, we're going to have him for the next 2 years. We got to make sure that we get him savvy and squared up, honestly, in the system, in Will Hardy's system. And it looks like he's finally starting to get there, and I really like that. But, in terms of the Jazz being buyers or sellers, like, they could do either. They have the assets to go get really whatever player they wanted to, if they wanted to try to make a push, or they could continue to dangle these wonderful pieces that they have. Because like you said, man, the Jazz's team consists of one all-star and a bunch of role players. And the fact that they're crushing other teams the way they are is just incredible. And there are teams right now that are desperate enough to overpay for a lot of these players. Like, look at Los Angeles, look at Golden State. Right now, those teams are constructed to win, and we already passed them up in the standings. Now, granted, it is only halfway through the year, but, it's trade season for a reason, right? There's a lot of teams that are desperate because they thought they would be much better than they are now. And I could see a team like Golden State, overpaying for Jordan Clarkson or Kelly Olynyk. I don't really think that Los Angeles has the assets we would want, but I definitely would be picking up the phone and calling Golden State to see what they would be willing to trade if that's the direction the Jazz wanted to go. Now, with that said, they can also just stand pat as well. They're playing incredible basketball. Everyone is having a lot of fun. Everyone seems to know their role and is flourishing in their roles. Look at Keontae George. He's a great example. He is playing more aggressive, which I love to see. Like, his shot selection has gotten a little tighter, which I also love to see. He had 19 3-and-3 last night. We have a really good team right now. So it really depends on the direction the front office wants to take it in. Now, there have been tons of rumors too about Lauri Markkanen. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't see any team. There's only one team actually in the entire league that has the assets to get Lauri Markkanen, and it's OKC. They're the only team that could potentially put a package big enough together to get Lauri Markkanen, and that would be a home run for them and make them title contenders instantly. But the question is, does Sam Presti really want to go all in like that? Because Danny Ainge is just going to squeeze him for everything he has. I'm talking 5 first rounders, which is ridiculous to think about because Lauri doesn't have the same pedigree that Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert had. But that's the kind of package he's going to ask for. He's going to ask for Jalen Williams. They're going to try to trade us Josh Giddey, and we're probably going to say no. Like, they're going to have to give up at least 2 or 3 players, young players, and then a quarter of their draft picks. Or I think they have 15 right now, so they still have 10 left, which is insane. But they're going to have to give up a lot. And the question is it going to be worth leveraging that amount of assets, especially under the new CBA for a player like Markkanen? And honestly, even if I was in the front office, even if I got a package offer like that, I still would be very hesitant to trade Lauri because of his efficiency and his production off of his usage rate. He's not even in the top 50 in terms of usage rate in the NBA, man. Not even in the top 50. And on a bad night, he can still get you 21-7. Lauri Markkanen is a special player. I just don't see the Jazz trading him. I think that they're just kind of flexing on everyone else. Per Tim McMahon, he said it himself. He said, Lauri Markkanen's not untouchable, but it's going to take an untouchable piece to get him. I think that says just how much the Jazz really value Lauri as a centerpiece moving forward.
So, Doc, are the Jazz going to make trades at this deadline?
I think they will. Just because, as I stated, I think that there are teams right now that are very desperate who are willing to overpay, like Golden State, like the Lakers. Both of those teams, every single time I turn on the television, all I hear about is Darvin Ham getting fired, which, by the way, would be a ridiculous move. Darvin Ham is not the problem. But everyone's talking about Golden State and the Lakers because they're hot garbage right now. And at some point in time, even Woj stated himself, Golden State is open for business outside of Steph Curry. That means Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, everyone on that roster besides Steph, Golden State is willing to part ways with, so they can try to make another playoff push. And they really have to when you think about it. Steph is still playing at an all-time, superstar level. And it would be a disservice to him to not get pieces around him that would help propel them into contention. So yeah, I think the Jazz will make trades because they're going to be getting calls from these desperate teams saying, hey, can we get who's available and what's it going to take to get them?
Yeah, I think someone like Olynyk could fit into any roster pretty seamlessly. I mean, he's coming off the bench for the Utah Jazz, shooting over 40% from three, great facilitator, just shoots very efficiently. I think somebody like Golden State, somebody like Boston, who has been rumored to be wanting for him. Yeah, anybody really would want him and covet for him. And so I bet the Jazz might move off of that expiring contract just to give Taylor Hendricks a bit more time. I could also see somebody like Fontecchio maybe getting moved. I also think he'd be a great person just to plug into a contender, because he's a guy who spaces the floor very well. He also shoots nearly 40% from three. He's been thrown into the Utah Jazz starting lineup, Doc, and he's been playing great defense as well. Yeah, so I think that
he's a really underrated defender. He really is.
And I think what it boils down to, Doc, is the Jazz, in my opinion, if they held this roster together, I think they're making the playoffs, which I would never have imagined earlier on in the season. And I believe, though, if they move off of some of their players, some of the key players that have been helping contribute to these wins, I think that Will Hardy can take what he's been given and find the strengths in all the players, maybe new assets, maybe losing some of the good assets like Olynyk or maybe even Jordan Clarkson, who have been helping a lot. He can take these assets that we've lost and, still contribute to winning. Maybe not potentially making the playoffs if we move off of some of those players, but still finds, a winning culture, developing the players that we need for the future and, building a future contender.
Yeah, I think no matter what you give Will Hardy, he's going to find a way to be competitive, and that's clearly one of the reasons why the Utah Jazz's front office hired him. No one thought we were going to be good last year, and we kicked the door down, and we were pretty competitive, even though we didn't make the playoffs. Teams knew that they couldn't come here, and we were just going to roll over for them. And now we're getting back to that footing again. So, I mean, at this point, you could probably give Will Hardy a couple of sticks and an empty bowl, and he would find a way to be competitive with that. He seems to be the MacGyver of the NBA, and I just love watching what he's creating.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Full Court Press NBA podcast. For the full podcast, click the link below and subscribe for more hoops content.